Roger, one of the most dramatic flowering trees for the temperate landscape has to be this red horse chestnut.
I think our ruby-throated hummingbird would agree with you, Paul. This is a hybrid between our Native American red buckeye and the European white horse chestnut.
And unlike that European species, this one doesn't get a nasty blight that turns all the leaves brown in the summertime.
And what's more, unlike most hybrids, it comes true from seed. Hello, I'm Roger Swain from Horticulture Magazine.
And I'm Paul Tukey from People, Places, and Plants Magazine, and welcome to our show. In this week's People segment, we're going to meet landscaper Michael Masier from Western Massachusetts, who believes that bigger is better when it comes to landscape stones. In our Places segment, we're traveling all the way to California to Bonsal, where the Bonterra vineyards are redefining the way wine grapes are grown.
Back here at Tower Hill, I'm going to show you how to divide perennials.
And some food for thought.
Yes, it's time for Ask People, Places, and Plants.
It's all coming right up.
Don't go away.
In my day as a landscaper, I used to move small boulders with a wheelbarrow. Well, today we're going to meet Michael Masier from Western Massachusetts, who needs machines like this Bobcat to move the stones he likes to work with. Mike Masier started out in landscaping like a lot of us who tried to make a buck behind a lawnmower. Growing up as a free-spirited adventurer in Bloomfield, Connecticut, he cut grass for spending money, and even after going to college to study massage therapy, he gravitated back toward landscaping with his own one-man company known as Earthworks. So tell me about the early days of Earthworks.
The early days of Earthworks were about, really not about anything other than not really working. I was into traveling, camping, having fun. It was a way to not have a job. I never really wanted to work for a company.
When he moved to Leverett, Massachusetts, to a remote mountainous region known as Rattlesnake Gutter, he said his landscape career came into focus in a new direction.
It's always been an inspiration to me. It's a huge glacial natural landscape, and the stone and the scale there and the water and the old garden, it's an awesome place. And I walk it every day, and I think it just seeped seeped in over the years. You know, you see something and you're like, that's awesome. How can I possibly recreate that?
Earthworks now has several employees who specialize in the design and installation of projects that feature huge stones that add instant age and maturity to landscaping. It's a style that immediately caught the eye of his client, Jim Holman.
It was evident in talking to them over the last couple of years that they're masters with stone and they're artists first. I just really wanted to collaborate with them.
Unlike most landscape designers, Masier rarely puts designs on paper, relying instead on communicating with the client.
About interpreting what they're seeing, what their vision is. A lot of people are not visual. So they might say to me, I want it to feel like something.
Masier has developed an amazing ability to earn his clients' trust. Every yard always looks worse before it looks better, especially on the first day at the job site.
If they come home even at lunchtime, we have just destroyed their place. In their eye, it's destroyed. Shrubs are pulled up, walks are pulled out, piles are here, trucks, machines, rocks are laying all over their yard, and it's impossible to make sense of as a homeowner. You know, it makes perfect sense to us.
And that's where Masier's skills as a therapist often come into play.
We are definitely healers. It's acknowledging that they're freaking out that's important. And that it's part of the process and it's not just them. Because they think I'm the only person in the world who freaks out when, you know, they don't realize that everybody does.
On this day at Jim Holman's yard, Masier's style was immediately evident. He and his one-man crew of Chris Carolla deftly slid huge slabs of stone into place. They discovered a massive piece of granite they decided would look good next to some large stone steps. All right, Mike, I got the perfect stone for this spot. What do you think?
Genius, Paul.
No?
No.
Well, the point I'm making, though, is that the scale with the stones that you work with is really different, because this would be a nice stone in a lot of landscapes.
Yeah, and scale is the hardest thing to learn in
Yeah.
stonework. And when we talked about rattlesnake gutter, what's so impressive about it is the scale. They're huge. In relation to the houses and the scale of the yards we work in, small stone just doesn't ever stand up. It was always disappointing. You can stack a lot of little ones to try and make the scale work, tall walls, but they're just not the same as using just as big a stone as you can move.
Relying on Corola's skills as a bobcat operator, Earthworks makes it look easy to work with ancient stones that weigh more than a ton. A bed of crushed rock ensures drainage, and a few simple implements. Hammers, chisels, shovels, and crowbars are the tools of the trade.
There's a tremendous amount of unspoken communication that goes on between Mike and I. No, there's never a set plan.
They come together like that. It's nice.
After just one morning at the job site, I can easily see why customers come to trust Michael Major pretty easily. It took 2 men and a machine just 4 hours to create a patio that will last forever. Ever since the gold rush of 1849 drew settlers to Northern California, the area's farmers have found the climate ideal for growing grapes. This area has long been famous for producing some of the world's finest wines. Well, about a decade ago, the Fetzer Vineyards of Hopland, California began to see a decline in some of its vines. And to fix the problem, they tried an experiment, growing some of the grapes organically. Well, those results, slowly but surely, have begun to revolutionize the way grapes are grown. Hopland, California, in the heart of Mendocino County, is about an hour north of the Napa Valley, the heart of the California wine industry, about 2 hours north of San Francisco, and about 50 years back into time when farming was the primary vocation for the average American family. About 15 years ago, the Fetzer family made a lifestyle, farming and marketing decision that was given little chance to succeed by the mainstream wine industry. Instead of relying on chemical pesticides to control insects and synthetic fertilizers to grow vines, the vineyard became one of the first to grow grapes organically on a large scale. A new brand of wine, Bonterra, was formed.
We had a vineyard, we had a Sauvignon Blanc vineyard that was really kind of on its last legs. It really wasn't performing very well, and it had a lot to do with the fact that, you know, the soil, we really hadn't paid attention to it. You know, it was this, we had a lot of tractor work, it was compressed, it was just, it didn't have the vitality. And as a result, you know, it didn't crop very well, we didn't have a very good crop, it didn't ripen very well, so the quality really wasn't there. And once we started organic farming, first step is look at the soil, putting in compost, planting these cover crops, and of course the vine responded.
At the 378-acre McNabb Ranch, where all the grapes for the Bonterra wines are grown, the farmers utilize numerous organic methods. Birdhouses attract birds, which in turn eat insects. Free-range chickens are released every morning that eat weeds and bugs, and the farmers themselves are constantly on the lookout.
Each vine in the vineyard, and there's 115,000 of them, are touched 7 to 9 times per year by human hands. So I don't have to worry about my workers getting sick or just being exposed to anything toxic and taking that home to their families.
Cover cropping is the essence of Dave Cobal's success as a farmer. By planting specific crops around the vines and between the rows, he has learned to control damaging insects and to create soil fertility.
Daikon radish is what we've got growing right here, and it really does both, fulfills both aspects.
It's a nice flower.
That's correct. And then white is a great color because it attracts a lot of insects while not attracting some of the herbivorous insects, some of the pest insects that we don't like. The second part of daikon radish that I really like for a couple different reasons is the taproot on it. So if I were to pull this out.
Okay, wow, looks like a carrot.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a, what, 10-inch long taproot on there. This is going to do 2 things for me. If I mow this cover crop, say right there, usually these taproots will get about 1.5 inches in diameter by the time we mow them. This will just deteriorate within the soil, and what we're left with is a nice hole in the soil. That's an entry point for water, aeration, or insects. Any organic matter that is generated by this cover crop, when it deteriorates, can fall in that hole and penetrates deeper into the soil profile.
If soils are too rich to grow grapevines, Coble plants barley and other grasses between rows to suck up nutrients. If he needs to add fertility, he grows clover. To attract beneficial insects, he plants lissom and Queen Anne's lace. These methods do take more time and effort, but it's a difference Bob Blue says you can taste.
I couldn't imagine going back to another way. I mean, just look at the dirt and look at
It's nice, healthy stuff.
Yeah, and you see the organic matter in there. And it's just perfect for growing great grapes, making a great bottle of wine.
Being this far from the mainstream has forced the Fetzer and Bonterra vineyards to do things a little differently to attract attention, including the creation of a massive display garden that invites visitors to stop and smell the flowers while sipping on a glass of wine.
They were having a hard time getting any recognition from the wine community because Mendocino County was such a little-known wine-growing region at that time, and they were a very small family winery. So they thought they would go in the side doors of the wine industry, which of course is lifestyle-oriented, with food very much part of it, and gardening.
Though I'll probably never grow my own vineyard, I was inspired to see such a large, healthy, organic garden. The principles are the same, whether you're growing wine grapes or wisteria.
We concentrate on our healthy soil. A healthy soil means healthy plants. And this is the premise that the vineyard operates on also.
Wherever I've been in recent years and seen agriculture on this scale, it's been accomplished with the traditional methods of synthetic pesticides, chemicals, herbicides. Well, here at the Bonterra vineyards in Northern California, it's gratifying to see the dance of nature and agriculture that goes into every glass.
The good news about perennial gardens is that the plants come back year after year. And the bad news is the plants come back year after year, which brings us to the subject of when is the right time to divide the plants. Some perennials can't be divided well at all. This flax, for example, or the dianthus in front of it. These are perennials that are propagated by cuttings or by seed, not by division. Another group of perennials can be divided, but don't have to be divided. These would include the daylilies, the hostas, and peonies. Take a look at this clump of peony and note the black ant that's gathering nectar and defending the developing flower bud. Divide a peony if you want to give a plant away. Otherwise, you can leave it alone for 20 years at a stretch. By far the majority of perennials, however, benefit from division every few years, either because they've exhausted the soil they're growing in or because they have outgrown the site. Take this clump of Rudbeckia goldsturm, for example. I don't know how many plants were put in originally, but now we have a solid sea of greenery. To divide this plant, simply a matter of taking a sharp spade, digging around the clump, loosening the whole thing, and taking it out of the ground in one big chunk. How much I'll be able to lift here, but I think I can get that up. Here goes. Up it comes. Up it comes, and out of the garden it goes. Boom. There we are. I've dumped the entire clump on a discarded empty peat moss bag, but whether you use a peat moss bag or a tarp, it sure makes putting the soil back into the bed easier than trying to rake it out of the grass. Now, a little bit of plant anatomy. If I tease out a section of this Rudbeckia, you'll see how the plants grow. With an underground rhizome that connects the older plant with the daughter plant, all you need to do is cut that there and you have two separate little plantlets. But I like to make bigger divisions the size of the 1-gallon nursery container that you'd buy a good size Rudbeckia in. For that, you want to make a division at the edge of a clump because the plantlets at the edge of the clump are younger than those at the center. Take a sharp nursery knife and simply slice down through, pulling off, say, a 1-gallon chunk. With the plant out of the ground, it's a perfect time to improve the soil, and nothing does that better than a few shovelfuls of good compost. The next step is to take a spading fork and mix all that nice compost into the soil, enriching the whole area. That's nice. Take a trowel and make a new planting hole. Here's my 1-gallon division. It goes back into the hole, keeping the same level that it was beforehand. Backfill with soil around it, firming it. You don't want to leave any air spaces around the roots. Create a little water dam around the edge. And with a watering can, I'm going to give it a nice, long drink of water. Now, because this plant has been rudely disturbed, and because it's a bright, sunny day, I'm going to give it a little artificial shade, thanks to a half-bushel basket turned upside down, covering the foliage for several days. As for the remaining 80% of that big clump, I've broken it up into 5 more divisions. When you're breaking a clump apart into small pieces like this, it's a great time to look for weeds that may have infiltrated, though I don't see any here. As for all the soil on this peat moss bag, believe it or not, it's all going back into the bed too. And as for these divisions, well, it's so incredibly easy to be generous as a gardener. But I suspect these are headed for the Tower Hill annual plant sale. Dear people, places, and plants, what's the best way to control slugs? Well, wherever it's dark and moist, slugs abound. So you can go out on a wet night and hand pick them, or lay a board down in your garden, go out by day, turn over the board, and you'll find the slugs hiding underneath. Traps work too. The best known is an empty tuna fish can buried with a rim flush with the soil's surface and filled with beer. Or you can just drink enough of the beer and you won't care so much about the slugs. As for barriers, a sprinkling of diatomaceous earth keeps slugs at bay as long as the diatomaceous earth stays dry. Better still are thin strips of copper. You can buy rolls commercially made for this purpose, or if you're a cheap New Englander like myself, make thin strips of old copper screen. Wrap either one around the rim of a flower pot or the trunk of a tree, and slugs won't cross it. As for poisons, the best known are based on the toxin metaldehyde, which unfortunately can be lethal to dogs and other pets. Far safer, I think, are new slug baits based on iron phosphate. These are formulated with bran that attracts the slugs. They feed, stop feeding, and 3 to 6 days later, the slugs, and only the slugs, are dead. Dear PPP, can you tell me how to keep my Mugo pine small? Mugo pine is a wonderful evergreen, hardy to zone 2, disease resistant, and there are many naturally compact varieties. But some of the Mugo pines that have been sold are faster growing for the simple reason they reach marketable size more quickly. If you have one of those, here's what you should do. It's a technique beloved of bonsai masters and Japanese gardeners called candling. It works with all pines. In the spring, when the new growth has extended but the needles have not fully formed, take your fingers and simply snap out half or 2/3 of each candle. Don't be tempted to do this with pruning shears, or when the needles have fully matured, you'll discover where you have sheared off the ends. And finally, dear PPP, what's the best way to support floating row cover? Actually, they call it floating row cover because it doesn't need any support. This young cucumber seedling, as it grows, will lift the fabric right up. But if you're one of the people who likes to construct neat little mini greenhouses in your garden, then get yourself some of this heavy galvanized wire. Bend it into hoops, stick it over the row, and stretch your floating row cover over the top.
Well, Roger, how's that for expert stone placement?
I don't know what OSHA would think about it, but it's a great way to come to work. That's our show today, folks. Be sure to join us next time.
And thank you for watching People, Places, and Plants, where every week we give you information, inspiration,
and an invitation to rock your world.